Hello, I'm Lee Shuba, and I'm going to be talking to you today about how to interpret a theme, in our case, a poetic theme, into a floral arrangement. This month, we're going to be looking at poetry by Phyllis Wheatley, and she was a former slave, and she published back in the 1700s, which was a remarkable achievement. She was brought to America when she was only 7 years old and was bought by the Wheatley family in Boston. The child was not healthy, and the owner's wife and daughter took over her care and nursed her back to health. And then when they realized how intelligent she was, they relieved her of most of her domestic duties and concentrated on educating her, teaching her reading, writing, speaking English, and they were instrumental in making her the person she became. Soon after she learned to speak English, she actually started writing poetry, and she was unable to find anyone to publish her poems in the United States, but she was sponsored on a trip to London. When she got there, she was able to find a publisher, and her first volume of poetry was published when she was 19. It was in 1773, and the book was called Poems on Various Subjects, Religious and Moral. She actually wrote most of her poetry about religion and about how grateful she was that God had brought her to America. I didn't choose to focus on that with our theme and the poem I picked, but it is true about her if you read her. They were very supportive of her career. She was admired by George Washington and Benjamin Franklin, and they eventually gave her her freedom. She married and had a child, but was lived in poverty to the extent that it affected her health, and she died at the age of 31. The poem I chose to focus on at our meeting is called On Being Brought from Africa to America, and the stanza we're going to be interpreting, I'm going to read to you. I, young in life, by seeming cruel fate, was snatched from Africa's fancied happy seat. What pangs excruciating must molest, what sorrows labor in my parents' breast. I feel after reading that the logical thing to interpret from it is her fancy, happy African background. Her parents' sorrow is the other theme in there, which is not something that would be very easy to interpret. So we're going to, I'm going to look at that as my theme, Africa. I am using today and demonstrating a pave technique. Pave is a French word meaning pavement, and it derives from the technique of laying stones very close together to build a road. It has been adopted by many different art forms, and jewelry is one of the main ones. I don't know if you can see this, but this is pave jewelry, where the stones are so close together that you can't see any metal in between. It's also been used in visual arts. I'm going to hold up a French tapestry. It's used in a lot of painting, pointillist, all kinds of stuff. This is the one I had on hand, and you can see the closely packed together flowers. You can see the background to some extent, but anyhow, it was used a lot in the arts. In flower arranging, the implication for flower arranging is that you place individual materials closely together to create a flat jewel-like pattern in which no mechanics are seen. This tight clustering style emphasizes contrast, color, and texture. The pave design and technique was originally developed from the jewelry industry. which uses the term to describe setting gems closely together. Pave is a technique, actually. It's not a design, an arranging design per se, but it is used by many arranging designs and flower arranging. A traditional German technique called Biedermeier uses it. I've used it doing landscape design arranging, where I use little tiny flowers very close together to create a backdrop. This week we're using it, this month we're using it as our arranging style, which is frequently done. It's not a very difficult style to understand. It is time consuming and a little, it takes a little care, and it particularly takes an eye for picking the right plant material. The plant material should be uniform in size mostly, and if you can't find them uniform in size, you should gradually increase or decrease the size according to your container so that you get that flat, even look. Colors should be contrasting, and as I said in the beginning, when I read that description of the arranging style, it should be jewel toned, which fits with our Africa theme. Trader Joe's is a wonderful place to buy lots of plant material for not much money. You never know what you're going to need really until you start working, so it's a great place. People criticize them for not having the staying power that other flowers have, but this only has to stay as long as you do the arrangement and take the picture. So if you make mistakes in your buying and whatever, it's not a huge consequence. Okay, I started a design in a clear, inconspicuous container. The Garden Club Handbook calls for that. It's I don't think it's always strictly necessary. I have used other containers that were more interesting than this. This is clear, but I still might cover it with something mossy maybe, since I'm using moss. This is an alabaster cake stand. I've done pave arrangements in this. It's really pretty. I've used this shape container. This is plastic. It doesn't matter. I've rimmed this with a leaf to make it, which might be pretty in an African design. You can use Oasis and cut it down to make it flat. If you're not using Oasis, which I did not choose to do right now, you have to pick something that these little short stems, because in pave, you're cutting them down like this, and they need to have something to grip into. They grip well into Oasis, but I chose moss. This is not commercial moss. This is out of our yard, and you can see that it is very thick and spongy, and it works great. It's also attractive, so you don't have to worry as much. If your flowers aren't right up against each other, you won't be seeing any mechanics like you would with Oasis. Sphagnum moss, if you're using Oasis sphagnum moss or commercial moss that's thin, that's a good thing to put over it in your arranging so that you don't have to worry about packing your material as tightly. This arrangement that I started, I was doing it based on colors that I thought might be evocative of Africa, but there are a lot of mistakes in this arrangement. I think you can see from the side that we're going from high to low, which is not right. So I'm going to work with these mistakes and show a couple of things I might do. I'm going to remove these roses. They're too high in that position. They're also pretty close in form to the carnations. I don't mind my carnations here. Sometimes carnations get very, they have a tall base, and I just cut that right off so I can get a lower profile with them. They still get water this way, and I can get a flatter design by that cut. So, don't be scared to do stuff like that. I like the red around the edge. I think it's a good edge, but I want to have something that's not taller. Contrast of textures is really key in this type of arranging. So I'm trying to think of what I could put next. What I might try is this seeded eucalyptus. It's definitely a different texture, and it's a contrasting color. Red and green are opposite on the color wheel. I don't know if you can, yeah, you can see what I'm doing. And I'm liking that. It looks more, I don't know, maybe tribal to me, African tribal. And it's flat. And definitely more interesting. Pave can get boring if you don't keep in your head that you need to vary color and texture. Okay, then I had these pink chrysanthemums here, which I could use. I'm not sure I really like that color scheme, so I'm going to throw them out. I think a better choice might be these black-eyed Susans from the backyard. They're not in great shape anymore, but I think they'll do okay. They look, again, maybe more tribal, more interesting. I'm distracted by all this mess in the middle, which is too low and probably the wrong colors. So I'm just going to grab some of these. This is looking better to me already. I'm not going to fill in this whole thing, as you can imagine. That could take a while, but I would work my way down using various contrasting materials and colors. I like this pink with this. This is a variegated carnation. I'm going to have to cut it off more. Mini carnation. That variegated color, which you may not be able to see on this camera, is a red flecked pink, which I think is an interesting contrast. So I would keep working that around. And this works all the way around the entire circle here. So you can imagine this taking a little time. Some people like that kind of work. It's not my favorite, but I do have fun thinking of it in theory. So I put up with the meticulous nature of it to get the effect that I want. I'm liking this. By the time you get to the middle where it's a little sunken there, I think I could probably go back to these roses, and they would be flat enough down there in the middle that they wouldn't detract from the overall design. I might, I'm thinking about using berries or pods between them to vary the texture. My yard is full of pods from seed heads, I guess they are, from all kinds of stuff. I might want a line of seed heads, which I'm not sure are showing up on camera, but they show up just fine right here. It also kind of echoes the black, these are black-eyed Susan seed pods, so it sort of echoes that theme here. And I kind of like that. I also have these little, what are they, echinacea berries. I think I'm going to put them with these little pink mini carns and use them as a decorative layer there, because I want texture I want it to look interesting. I want it to look the opposite of boring. So to the extent you can see this, as I said, in person, it's pretty evident what I'm doing here. It does give a variation that I like. Okay, I'm going to move now to, this format is the most traditional format used in doing pave, but I'm going to move to a different one. In envisioning what I wanted to do today, I wanted to do something that looked African also. But in my head, I was doing it with a rectangular shape, and there aren't many vases that are rectangles. So let me get these out of my way. I used a small cookie sheet, and I covered it with the edges with green tape, and then I have leaves that are distributed around the edge. I wanted this form to look like African fabric. That's where I came from on this. And so I chose colors and textures that reminded me, again, I'm going to cut this carnation to flatten it out. I wanted the colors to look more tribal. That one's shot. Okay. Oh, let me find a different one. Here's one. Okay. So I'm putting in this bright red one. These mini carnations looked really great to me. They're not carnations, they're chrysanthemums. They looked really African tribal to me. I put a double row in them to give them more weight in this arrangement. These are thistles, which often don't show up very well in an arrangement, but I like the purple in contrast to the red, and I used some more kind of lavender here. I picked thistles that had a paler center so that they would show up better and not recede as much as blue often does. I use these small, I like these small textured mums here, but I wanted to put in some seed pods up there to, well, again, doesn't show up too well here, just to make this a more interesting design in this corner. This is seeded eucalyptus, which is great. This is, let me see where I have that. This is a little mini carnation, and it has a pattern that almost looks like leopard skin, and it's in great color. It's a great color. This was my favorite find at Trader Joe's this week. So I interspersed this pattern, which shows up great on the moss, within a leaf and seeded striated motif there. This empty section right here is where I swiped the Black-Eyed Susans from to do the other arrangements. So I'm going to put them right back here because they're just what I want here. So this is not a traditional pave design in that it's not round, it's not uniform exactly, but I think that it's lined up very neatly, and if you look at it from the top, it does not look like there's many mechanics showing. It's varied in texture, it's contrasting in color, it's jewel tone, and hopefully it looks African. So that is all. I hope many of you will attempt that this month for our meeting, because it is extremely clear cut and easy to do. It is a great, if you're not used to flower arranging, this is a good place to start. Put your head to the task, and just keep those three things in mind: color, texture, and theme, and see if you can come up with something that makes you think of that poem by Phyllis Wheatley.